Hi guys and Happy New Year. So, as I said before, it's important to listen to experts and not politicians when it comes to how business and trade operates. Now, Sam Lowe, who's a trade expert, spoke to the Today programme about how checks happening this month will impact businesses. But first we'll listen to another expert, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was asked about how the Port of Dover will deal with Brexit. Now remember that Mogg was an advocate for some time of a no-deal Brexit. The problems we saw last year and the problems we're going to see this year are under, in a sense, a best-case scenario. Mogg wanted for a time something much, much worse. Let's hear what he had to say back in 2018.
Indeed, and thank you for calling, Nathaniel. And the issues in Dover are obviously important and have been raised regularly by Charles Elphicke, the MP for Dover. The government has got plans in place, and there are two sides of this. One is goods coming in. Goods coming in will be under our control, so there will be no need to have any delays in goods coming in from the continent in the event that we leave without a deal, because goods that are safe on the 29th of March will be safe on the 30th of March. And that means that inbound traffic ought not to suffer any delays because it will be our choice.
And that's actually what happened. So the UK government decided to abandon sovereignty and allow goods to come in. They prioritise flow over controls.
On steroids rather indicates going the other way, going out of the UK.
The issue is with lorries going back. Now, a third of lorries going back are actually empty because we import more from the EU than it does from us.
We import from the EU more from the EU than it does from us. At the time, Brexiteers were saying, they need us more than we need them. Well, obviously, Jacob Rees-Mogg is countering this by saying we actually need them more than they need us.
The third of the lorries going back empty ought not to be delayed because they've got nothing to declare. It's just the lorry going back. The two-thirds that have goods may be subject to delays, and the government does indeed have a plan for that. And the Department of Transport is one of the few departments that has actually done a lot of work to be ready for no deal. And it's
so we'll have checks at Dover.
No, we won't have checks at Dover. That's a customs excise responsibility.
Right.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais. That could have a knock-on effect.
Sorry, Calais going in or Calais coming?
Calais going in.
Well, that means I can't get on the boat.
That's where you need Operation Stack.
So he's right. Let's go back to Nathaniel.
There will be, if we leave without a deal, and the French say your goods can't come in via Calais...
Which is highly likely.
Which is possible, but then there are other ports, and Rotterdam and Antwerp have been increasing their infrastructure and taking on more customs.
But as we've seen, it's not just France. But actually, let's hear what a real expert has to say about this, because, Jacob Rees-Mogg is obviously not an expert.
And what do you think it means in practical terms for companies?
So these controls right now, I think people always discuss checks, and there's this idea that there's someone at the border just banging open trucks and slowing people down. But these controls are really a bureaucratic issue. So it's going to mean more cost, more time. It's going to require more expertise, and the reaction to that will be different depending on what sort of company you are. If you're a big company, maybe you just suck it up and you've got the people who've been preparing to do it and you pay them to do it and find goods continue to move as usual. But for some smaller companies, they might find that they don't have the money to pay someone to help them with this. They don't have the time, they don't have the capacity, so it could lead to them deciding to stop buying things from the EU.
Stop buying them, but if they do decide to continue, could that mean that they'll raise their costs?
Well, there certainly are going to be additional costs throughout the supply chain, and we've felt some of these already, and these will be on top of that. So the decision companies will have to make is whether to suck that up, maybe take less profit, or to pass those on to consumers. And of course, we are in a time of rising prices at the moment anyway, so this could certainly add to that.
What kind of advantages might there be for the UK in this?
Well, we go back to the sort of general premise Brexit, and the UK has prioritised having the flexibility to set its own rules and regulations over having frictionless trade with the European Union, which would require regulatory alignment and giving up some of that autonomy. So the question for the UK is, as it has ever been, what does it choose to do with this freedom? So if the argument would be that this is a cost, and it's an observable cost to businesses, but the UK will offset it elsewhere. But I think we're still waiting to see the full picture on that one.
So it will be offset elsewhere. Where will it be offset? That's the problem here. As I said before, the politicians will promise the cake and the eating of the cake as well. We heard Jacob Rees-Mogg say, look, there'll be very few checks carried out at Dover. And don't worry, we don't have to worry about Calais. We can send our goods to other ports in the EU. Obviously not understanding that the UK as a third country will be treated the same by European nations, apart from Ireland, of course. There's a particular case there. But Rotterdam or other ports around Europe doesn't make any difference because the UK will be the third country. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg either didn't understand this at the time or he lied about it. It could be a mix of both. Jacob Rees-Mogg is not a trade expert. This is the consequence of the UK becoming a third country. Now, as I said before, Jacob Rees-Mogg for a time advocated for a no-deal Brexit, which would have been much worse than the situation we're in at the moment. Now, just to give you an example, this is from Kieran the van driver, who sometimes appears on LBC with James O'Brien. He posted this on Twitter. You can see this is French customs. For couriers or operators who don't have the documentation correct, there's a fine of 300 euros. This is passed on to the consumer. So once again, as we heard from the expert, these costs are likely going to be passed on to the final customer. If there are problems with paperwork, this is going to be passed on to the consumer as well. And as with rising prices, it's going to become more and more difficult for ordinary people to tolerate the costs of Brexit. Jacob Rees-Mogg will be perfectly fine. Nigel Farage will be perfectly fine. All of the Brexiteers will not be affected by these rises in prices. They advocated for these things and they're not suffering the consequences. Ordinary businesses are. And we've seen in 2021 how UK businesses, in order to continue to operate, had to move operations to the European Union. Small businesses in Europe who want to export to the UK to provide products and services, well, products mainly, to Britain, will either have to relocate or they will decide it's not worth the hassle. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.